Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fetch Quest podcast, where we talk about video games and more. I am joined by my fellow co-host, Connor.
Hello.
Hi, Connor. I must ask, how have you been, dog? How have you been?
To be honest, guy, I've been better.
Better? What's wrong?
Well, it's just that after the war, I've been really depressed.
What?
Yeah, it's just like seeing my best friend die in front of me. It was real rough, and I've just been super bummed out.
Wait, Connor, what are you talking about?
And then having to travel to like a whole new reality on top of that, it's just been a lot.
Connor, what are you talking about?
What do you mean?
What are you saying these things? I never heard of you being in a war. What the fuck?
I'm just dropping my lore, man. Gotta give the Fetch Quest lore scholars more material.
What? Well, that's just not true. You haven't been in a war.
Yes, I have. That's all of what I just said. All of it is true. It's more true than my love for my deceased girlfriend was.
Oh my god. How I know this isn't true is that Connor doesn't love women more than video games, and that's coming in today's topic, lore. And yes, the thing that I just said about Connor, that's true lore. I made it up on the spot. I don't know if that's real or not.
Alright. But yes, today we're doing a video on video game lore and just how, what are some of our favorite video game lore is, how lore affects, the player experience, and just what it is in general. So,
Yeah.
Guy, if you wouldn't be opposed, I'd like to sort of give my, because we're obviously going to give our explanations of what we think video game lore is to us first. So, I would like to go first.
Yeah, go for it, man. Go for it.
All right. So, at least how I myself define video game lore is essentially, at least when it comes to lore and story, because I know some people definitely can mix those up. But how I see is that lore is the history of the world and the characters that you are in. Like, excuse me. Like for example, like if your character, you never see it in the story, but if your character got into like an accident or something, they have a scar, that's lore. Or if there was a huge war before the events of the story, that's lore. It's the history that is present within the world that helps with the world building. That's how I see the lore. That's how I define lore. Where a story is the actual present events that are taking place within the game that you are, going through.
Yeah, no, pretty much lore is kind of like it can be like defined as a broad topic of anything that is like that explains the history or the background of something can be classified as lore. So like if you want to get technical, the Civil War in America is technically American lore. Or that's just a random example, but that applies to video games as well, because we've gotten to a point in video games where technology is able to create these fictional worlds and make them so expansive and explorable that the writers of the games have decided to put in lore, a lot of lore, good and bad depending on the series, to like flesh out the world so that people can become more immersed.
Yeah, and speaking of immersed, like how, at least for us, how does lore affect our immersion and our enjoyment of games? That's something I'd like to go on and talk about, I guess. And
Yeah, of
since
course, man.
if you don't mind, since I went first for explaining lore, how about you go first for immersion?
Sure, man. For me at least, when it comes to like video game lore and like what it means for immersion, I love reading like in-game excerpts about like a specific tale or a hero that went throughout the land and did said thing, because it gives an explanation for what I'm seeing. So like, what's a really good example of recent Metaphor ReFantagio? They have these things when you're traveling the world. You'll sometimes stop at a beautiful locale And these locales range from like floating islands to like desolate wastelands, but the idea behind them is that like they flesh out the world, and some of them you're given explanation for as to why they happen like that. And for me at least, I think it does an excellent job of fleshing out the world and like giving context to events that have happened prior to the story. Another good example is Baldur's Gate 3. There are so many books in that game. I think for the best though, because the books explain a lot of the context of the characters, including the villains, some of the past heroes in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. I think those books do an excellent job of telling a story of characters from long past. Like the best character in the game, Ketherick Thorm, he's an excellent villain, voiced by J.K. Simmons. But the thing is that like we don't understand his full motivation until you read the lore excerpts from Baldur's Gate 3. And I think because the game wants me to immerse itself in its lore, I become more invested with what's going on. So when I eventually defeated Ketherick Thorm, it wasn't just, oh, there's my typical Saturday morning cartoon. Because I immersed myself with the game's lore, I actually felt bad for him.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what you're saying. Like, video game lore is some of my favorite lore just in general because you're able to do a lot more with building up that lore because you just have so much more time to work with. Like, um, a very good example of this is just like the Zelda series in general because they are such long games that a lot of them, especially the 3D ones, can really like build out the lore of their worlds and stuff like that. A great example being Breath of the Wild, and just like you get so much on the history through environmental storytelling and characters that have lived past the giant calamity that happened, and it's just such great. Like, the lore not only makes me more invested in the world, but it also contributes a lot to the world building, and it's just so, it really gets me immersed because it feels like I am exploring like an actual lived-in world instead of just playing a video game. Sometimes that's what good lore can do. It can get you so immersed where it looks like you're getting a glimpse into this actual world that exists, and that's why I like it so much.
Now thinking about it, some of the games with some of the best lore are actually open world games. Just to
Yeah,
like
and
throw out a few examples, you have Elden Ring, but that's FromSoft. That's typical. They're gonna have great lore. But like Skyrim and Fallout, Skyrim
yeah,
has so many books about just what happened in the world, and there have been many like documentations on the internet about trying to interpret the lore and like what fits into a timeline. Like I had a professor back in high school. His name is Wesley Dry. God bless his soul. We love him. He's a great dude. He I remember in his free time when he wasn't grading work for his AP class, he would look up videos about the interpretations of Skyrim lore.
yeah, that's what good lore can do. It can, you want to know those answers. You want to know like how this happened, how it fits in, and I think the reason why open world games especially have great lore is because you're able to do a lot more. Because the whole task when building an open world game is to literally create a world. You have to if the player can go everywhere, you kind of have to flesh out every place. And then there are some games that don't really you know go with that standard of like not fleshing out the world that is, like very big examples, but I you know it
Big
truly is.
examples.
Yeah. Examples. Ooh, I might get some hate for this, but at least specifically Horizon Forbidden West. I feel like
Oh
the game.
God.
Yeah, and I'll go into this more later when we go over good and bad, like games with good and bad lore, but I feel like Horizon really, at least Forbidden West, just kind of doesn't do environmental storytelling and lore with the environments as well as the first game does. Like, and that's just my opinion on it.
And
Um,
frankly, in that ruined some of your enjoyment for the game. Am I correct in saying that?
Um, yeah, because at least for me, I'm a very big fan of open world games. It's just that a lot of open world games, at least nowadays, since there were so many of them, a lot of them kind of feel half baked. And like a big reason I love open world games so much is because of the just vast amount of world building and lore you can do with with the medium of an open world game. And like a great example of what I'm talking about actually comes from the first Horizon game. In Horizon 1, when you are at the basically the capital of the Sun Kingdom, if you walk around and you like explore, you at different times of the day you can see like sun priests doing like a little like prayer session for like different times of day, and like that's such a cool thing that to add, because it shows that they for at the because they worship the sun at different times of the day when the sun is either in a different position in the sky. They have different prayers and rituals for that sort of stuff, and I think that's super cool. But the second game just kind of doesn't have anything like that.
Hmm.
and and so it's just like you get this like and I know some people don't like the first Horizon game, and I definitely can see their point of views, but like there was just something about the first game that it did really well with the open world format and stuff like that. It really does suck that I just don't know how they just kind of really screwed up the second game. But again, I'll go deeper into that later in the vid.
Now, okay, one thing I want to point out, just because a game might have like underwhelming or even bad lore doesn't mean it's not enjoyable. Hell,
Yeah,
most
I
fighting game
yes,
lore is fucking ass. It is like utter ass. But the thing
yeah,
is that like the lore isn't at the forefront of the game. It's just more so the lore exists to explain the events that's happening right now.
exactly.
It's
Um,
like it's like so they like let's good example. Mortal Kombat lore is fucking ass. I love it all the same because it's ass, but like it's just an explanation for like why things happen. Like I remember at the end of Mortal Kombat X, Cassie Cage, Johnny Cage's daughter, she randomly gains her father's power of green glowy stuff and is able to defeat a god because of it without any explanation. But I fuck with it because they just need an ending to the story, and also it's just a cool mechanic. Like I don't really care all that much because the game is still really fun. However, I think a really big distinction that we also need to make is that when games put a lot of emphasis on the lore, I feel like that's when it kind of becomes like dragging, and that's when you start to like it lessens your enjoyment. Like Connor said, like Horizon Forbidden West. I haven't played Forbidden West myself, but I've talked to Connor a lot about this. It seems that the game puts a lot of emphasis on its lore, but the problem is that because its lore isn't the best or most well thought out, it kind of ruins the enjoyment of the game. Like Connor, can you attest to that?
yeah, and I will agree that like with um it depends on genre, obviously, like you were saying, like different game types of games are going to emphasize different parts of it. Like fighting games, for example, those games don't emphasize their story at all because you're not there for the story, you're there for the gameplay, you're there for the good mechanics and fighting opponents. Like if I'm going into Street Fighter, like I can't wait for a great story from Street Fighter 6, I'm going to be disappointed because that's not the point. The point is that it has an amazingly thought out system with drive and just soup, and just everything else in the game is just super well thought out with gameplay. But when you're playing an open world game or just any game that like is very emphasizing its story or its lore, and that lore is bad, then it's going to be a big letdown if because you're putting so much time and effort into saying like, hey, our lore, our story is interesting and it's very cool, but you just didn't put in the time and effort to actually make it interesting or cool.
I think that's a fun transition into like what we like a list of that we've compiled of like what good and bad lore is. We couldn't think of a lot of bad lore because we couldn't think of like a lot of games that we've played at least with bad lore, but like
Yeah,
I want to at least talk about some of the good examples and why they're good, and then the bad examples and why they're bad.
yeah,
So like
we'll do it how about this? We'll do a thing where I list, like, one of us lists good lore, the other lists good lore, and then we do a bad lore, sort of like a compliment sandwich. It's sort of like
Yeah,
that.
sure. Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. Do
Connor,
you want to go
I will
first?
let you start on that, or would you like me to start?
Um, you start. I feel like I've been hogging a lot of the spotlight this video.
No, you're good. You're good. Um, One game that I want to talk about, that isn't really brought up that much on this channel, but we will be doing a episode when Silksong comes out. Hollow Knight. I think it has one of the best and most well thought out lores in a video game. Where I'm not gonna get into it, like much of it because there's a lot, but the idea is that the world is completely underground, and the kingdom that you explore is like the only kingdom in the world where bugs have become sentient through like the Pale King, who is like he's the cause of like everything bad in the game. But the idea is that Hollow Knight does an excellent job of environmental storytelling with its enemies and its locations, while also having very interesting NPCs who have reason to be in the world, but also give insight into why they're in the world and what they're doing at that point. And I just really want to shout out Hollow Knight because the story isn't even like that complex. It's more so you're a knight sent to Hollow Nest and you must defeat the Hollow Knight. But like it becomes complex when you delve into the lore and understand why you're there and like discover the origins of the knight himself. And I just think that it's really fucking cool for that. Like I think games like that, they're at their best when the story is very simple, but the lore behind it makes every action that you take complex.
Yeah, and I want to elaborate more on the lore of Hollow Knight. I would not say I'm like a lore scholar, but I do know a decent amount about it. But I all I'm gonna say is
I
that
actually don't want to because it's heavy spoilers, and the Hollow Knight is one of my favorite games ever. Probably my favorite Metroidvania, if I'm gonna be real. And
Mhm.
I want people to experience like
No,
the
I okay.
discovery of the game.
Okay, yeah. The way I worded that was bad. I meant to say I wanted to elaborate more on like why I enjoy the lore of Hollow Knight, not on what the actual lore is.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I agree. I agree. The lore is like so good, and one of the honestly one of my favorite parts of the game is its lore, but it's just like it's so immense. Like it Hollow Knight is the perfect encapsulation of what I was talking about earlier, where it is a glimpse into a world, a destroyed world, and there's so much history and just so much history that you can get from all of the things. And all I'm gonna say is that I don't know, guy. Have you ever heard of the YouTuber Mossbag?
I have, yes, I know who you're talking about. He's the Hollow Knight lore guy.
Yes. If he is able to make a almost hour and a half long video about the lore of Hollow Knight, and I just want to preface that the video he did is not even the complete lore of Hollow Knight. He left some stuff out, but if there is that much lore in that game to have like an almost hour and a half long video on it, and it not even be enough, like that's just so much, and it's so cool to see that much care put into the lore. And another thing is just like another thing that I kind of like about Hollow Knight's lore is that it's up to interpretation, but in the good way, where there are a lot of different interpretations you can make from it, but it's not like you're grasping at straws or anything. It's like there's a bunch of evidence for each of these points. It's just which point makes more sense or which point fits better. And I really like that. It leaves a little mystery in the air.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Like games like that, they love leaving some stuff ambiguous, but I think for the better, honestly. Like what's another good game that like
And
leaves stuff ambiguous for the better in my opinion? Elden Ring. Fuck.
yeah, and all I'll say is that we are going to get into a game series later that does that the wrong way, that have stuff be ambiguous, but it's done poorly.
You will
Um,
be shocked at what it is.
yes, um, but I guess it's my turn now, and I'm going to once again bring up Zelda. Um, Zelda as a whole has really good lore, whether it be through the three golden goddesses, the Triforce and how it was created, and just generally like really cool stuff. One of my favorite examples I've already listed is Breath of the Wild. Just the environmental storytelling and the just amount of lore within that game is insane. Like there's just so much history in that world, especially seeing it in its destroyed, ruined state. Um, Another great example for me is Skyward Sword, because there is a lot of because the whole thing is that in the game you are essentially exploring a forgotten world on the surface, on like the ground level, because your people have been living in the sky for so long. But when you get down there, there are already huge like remnants of civilizations and stuff like that. You literally like fight a deceased pirate crew, and it's like and that is so cool because it's like, what happened here? If this is still super far in the back in the past, but we've gotten so many like there's already futuristic technology, there's destroyed civilizations and remnants of people who were, and it's like that's so cool. I love thinking about that. I love trying to figure out what happened there, and like just Zelda as a whole does that a lot, in especially in the 3D games when you can do more of that stuff. I haven't played it myself, but I've heard from Liam, one of our co-hosts, that Twilight Princess also does this really well within like lore and environmental storytelling and stuff like that. Um, and so yeah, Zelda's just always been really good with its lore and stuff like that.
Hell yeah, man. No, I agree. Like, and the thing is though, is that like Zelda doesn't even have like excerpts upon excerpts of like lore or stuff that you need to read. Like Connor was saying, Zelda does an amazing job of using environmental storytelling to like give you context of what's happened. Like you said, they're used the pirates in a Skyward Sword, like in the sand desert. I just think I'm with you on that. That is so cool. How like they drip feed us information about stuff that has happened, but they aren't going to tell us everything. And I just think that like Zelda does an excellent job with environmental storytelling as well. And the thing is that they know their target audience. Like it's gonna be like young kids and teenagers, and some adults, because Zelda's pretty much for everyone. But like they make the lore approachable, and not like you don't need to be a scholar to understand everything. I just think that's really sick.
Yeah, and there, if I had to give like just to like I guess tread back, if I had to give one thing against Hollow Knight is that there are some of the excerpts and stuff in Hollow Knight for the lore. You need a very large sort of reading level, like not large reading level, but you need a higher reading level for that, which can make the lore a little inaccessible. Luckily, there are people on the internet who like break that down for you and like stuff like that, so it's a lot easier to understand it. But with as the guy was saying with Zelda, it's approachable from any real age gap that anyone can really understand it as long as they're willing to think on it and engage with the lore itself.
Did you really just pull a Rick and Morty fan?
No,
You
I
were
know
like,
what
you need to have a high reading level to understand this.
okay, yes, it does sound bad when you put it like that, but a lot of the excerpts from like Hollow Knight do take a lot of inspiration from like Shakespearean sort of like dialogue and stuff like that. And if little Timmy, 5-year old, is playing Hollow Knight for the first time and he sees that, he's not gonna understand what the hell's happening. That's essentially what I mean.
No, I get you. I get you. I just think the way you worded that was really funny,
Yeah, no, I
bro.
agree.
Oh god. But
But I guess now it's our time for bad lore.
oh no, not bad lore. Okay? Do we want to bite the bullet and say it right now?
Yeah, I
We
guess
might as well.
let's keep the suspense out.
All
Let's get
right,
rid of all
let's.
this.
I can't wait for this to become our most disliked video. Holy shit.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
the example that we have for bad lore is Five Nights at Freddy's,
Yep.
which, yeah, And a lot of people might be thinking, what? Why? If there's so many videos and YouTube
So many
channels just
YouTubes
dedicated
about it.
to yeah, and there's the game theorists may have like over 50 videos on the lore of FNAF, like, and that's a bad thing. I want people to realize that's kind of a bad thing because it means the lore is constantly changing and not staying consistent.
The
Now,
thing that
there's
Scott caught, yeah, you first. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say now with FNAF, since a lot of game that has a lot of games and they're always coming out, yeah, obviously the lore is gonna change. The thing is with FNAF, and me and Guy know a good amount about. At least I do. I can't really speak for Guy because, but I'm gonna assume he also knows a good about of FNAF lore. The thing with FNAF lore is just it's not consistent. It's constantly going back on details or changing and adding to them to make it either more convoluted or just to make it more confusing because I mean if you remember back to the days of FNAF 1, FNAF 2, a big reason the game kind of blew up is because of that lore because there was that mystery element of the missing kids incident and stuff like that.
Yeah, Scott Cawthon did not like plan the FNAF lore when he was
Yeah.
creating it, and like
Literally
obviously
uh, FNAF 1 was literally going to be his last game. So if anyone thinks he planned this out from the start, then they're just delusional.
you're wrong. You like because that's just factually incorrect. But the thing is that like obviously like I credit him a lot because he really did like he did a good job of like making an indie horror series and like he did it all by himself. I'm not like we're not discrediting that at all. The thing
Yes.
though, however, is that I'm sorry, but like when you're having to explain parts of the story through books that are non-canon,
Or
like
having to
I'm
go on
sorry, like that's on you. You know what I mean?
or having to go onto a website and to basically play detective and trying to figure out like is this character going to be in the next FNAF game. I remember that like right after Help Wanted came out, there's people were having to dig deep in the files to figure out the new character that was being introduced and their motivations. And then when Security Breach came out, that's the only way you would have known about the main antagonist motivations and stuff like that is by doing that lore diving. And that's just bad storytelling. That's not even bad lore. That's just bad storytelling.
No, I concur, man. I
And
concur because it's like it's
yeah,
really unfortunate too because like FNAF has good stuff in it. It's just the problem is that like they don't know with making FNAF, they don't know when to stop with some stuff.
yeah. And when you are constantly having arguments over the timeline, if your timeline isn't even consistent, like think of Security Breach. That game is very futuristic in aesthetics and stuff like that. So a lot of people think, oh, that means it takes place in the future where technology has advanced to a point where these types of things could exist. But the game, the story and the lore within the game makes it to where, oh, it actually seems like it takes back place a lot further back in history, like a lot further back within the timeline, and as opposed to stuff like, uh, FNAF 3, which takes place like in the year like what 2040 or something, and that's super confusing and weird. And then you have Security Breach, which is supposed to take place in like the 80s or 90s, yet the robots look so much more futuristic and just better than the stuff that was in FNAF 1 or FNAF 2, which are supposed to take place around that same time. It's confusing and weird.
Okay, I know Security Breach is supposed to be on the end of the timeline right now because the ending of the game, you see the corpse of of Springtrap from. I hate even getting into this. Of Springtrap from the ultimate, not Ultimate Custom Night, the Tycoon pizzeria simulator. Because it burnt down, but they built the establishment that is in Security Breach over that. Hence why William Afton Springtrap is in the ending of that game. Yada yada. I don't want to get into it. Point that we're getting is they aren't consistent with what they are trying to tell, and they are constantly changing up like what shit means in the series.
Yep.
because it wasn't planned out. And the thing is, FNAF is so successful, why need to why would you need to like keep the lore consistent when everything is just working? You know, you keep making the money. Who cares?
Yeah. And the thing is too is with FNAF, it kind of sucks because a big reason, as I said before, a big reason FNAF got really popular is because of those theory videos, whether it be by Game Theory or just any other channel. Like FNAF's lore was a huge reason it got pretty popular. Like I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that.
You're not.
And so to see the series that was once, like really praised for having deep lore and like interesting lore to like now be turned into this giant amalgamation of just misinformation or just incorrect, inconsistent like lore, it's kind of sad. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it is. That is how it is, and it's unfortunate, but it's just the reality we live in. All right, we've been harboring on FNAF a little too long. Let's talk about some more good lore.
Yes, you can go first.
Okay, so one game that I want to talk about, we mentioned it a little earlier in the video, that I think has phenomenal lore, not perfect lore, but phenomenal lore, is Elden Ring. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
this you're gonna steal the show here. I have no clue about any Elden Ring lore, so go ahead.
Okay, Elden Ring lore, it's peak. It's awesome. How do I even begin it? You, as the Tarnished, come from a distant land, summoned to the lands between to take control of the Elden Ring. But, problem is, that bitch Marika, she was like, I'ma be a little quirky, and decided to shatter the Elden Ring because she doesn't like being Marika. So, you have to slay the demigods throughout all of the lands between so that you can reform the Elden Ring and then claim yourself as Elden Lord. Yeah! Yeah, that's pretty much like the setup for Elden Ring. But basically, why I love Elden Ring lore so much is because they do the same thing of like reading excerpts with item descriptions, which I think is really funny. You can learn about like a specific location in the game by reading the description of a dagger, which I think is fucking hilarious. But the thing is that like I love that they give us item descriptions because they thought out everything in this world, including the shit you pick up from it. I just think that's so cool. I don't think the lore is perfect. However, there's some stuff in the DLC, which I won't mention now because it's spoilers, that I think is a little confusing, and I don't understand why they would do stuff like that. It's to deal with the final boss of the DLC. It kind of recontextualizes stuff, but not in the best way. But besides that, I do think, for the most part, I think everything's just extremely well thought out, especially with like how the map is placed, how the bosses are placed, their motivations, the lines they use, where you fit in all of this. I don't know. There's so much to take in from Elden Ring lore, and shout outs to Vadi Vidya for explaining most of the lore in like such clear fluidity that it can become digestible for anyone. And I just think it's so cool how like we have multiple scholars who are like deep diving into Elden Ring lore because of how complex it is. But yeah, no, I just think it fleshes out the world, it makes you more immersed. And hell, Brewer can attest to this, even though he's not in the episode, that like he became more interested in the story because the lore was there to help like guide him into it helped guided him into understanding what was happening in the world around him, and he became more invested into it. I remember when he was doing his first playthrough of the game, he and I were talking about the lore all the time. He was like, how does this happen, this, and then I would explain it to him. He'd be like, oh, that's so cool, that's making me think about the theories about stuff that's going to happen later on in the game and yada yada. And I just think that's really cool. I think Elden Ring just does an excellent job of building a world and having you immersed in it. And it's optional whether or not you want to immerse yourself in it, but however, I just think it's worth it because it's Elden Ring and it's raw as fuck.
Yeah, I have played through Elden Ring and its DLC, but I could not tell you really anything about the lore that Brewer or Guy have explained to me. And that's not because I'm not interested in it. It's just because like it's a lot. It's a
It's a
really
fuck
big
ton.
game, and yeah, it's a lot of lore. So it's a little I guess like intimidating. I'll say is the best way to get it to say it. But no, I fully agree that Elden Ring has really deep, really interesting lore. Um, and another game that I want to bring up that I think has interesting lore that you wouldn't think actually has lore. I know I was talking to Guy earlier, and he didn't even think this game had super deep lore, but Minecraft, of all things, Minecraft has really deep lore.
I okay,
Um,
we were talking about this last night. I didn't think about it, like it having big lore, and then you started like going into detail, and I was like, wait, there's Minecraft lore?
Yes, there's unironically Minecraft lore, and it's really cool. Like honestly, lore. And there's it's the only thing about Minecraft lore is that it's very disconnected. It's less of like building a narrative and more so just explaining why the things are the way they are now. For example, the villagers and the pillagers. Why are the pillagers like? Why do they look like villagers but evil? Um, and a popular theory that is, there's a lot of evidence through the lore is that the pillagers are actually doing experiments on the villagers and turning them into either other pillagers or just monstrous versions of the like a giant monster rams they ride. Like there's a very big theory of that they're like turning them into monsters with like dark magic and shit like that, which is there's a lot of evidence in the lore for that. um Another example of like lore in Minecraft is the I think it's the seven it's the 13th no it's the 13th CD, which is broken. But if you listen to that CD and you like deeply analyze it, you can hear like a lot of background noise, whether it be like someone walking on blocks or a creeper blowing up in the background. And like there's obviously lore and storytelling there. Um and uh, if you want even more examples, um, then look at the literally the ending of the game. When you jump into the end portal, you witness a huge monologue that is, you know, the sort of context that most people have like sort of the biggest interpretation is that the two people talking are literally gods that were watching you in your adventure, which recontextualizes a good amount of the events and stuff like that that happened. And so there have been a lot of interpretations of what that means. And like there's an interesting lore. Like I sadly don't know a huge amount of it, but I do know some of it, and what's there is very interesting.
Hell yeah. I mean, okay, here's something I want to bring up before we continue on. There is a difference between like lore that is really well thought out and good, and lore that is there just to explain some context for stuff. So like Minecraft, I think it's interesting. I'm not gonna say it's entirely great lore because it's just like it's not like a main focal point of the game, but it is there, and I think that's really interesting. And it like kind of
Yeah,
gives some
exactly.
context for stuff in the game, and I think that's cool.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not saying it's anything, like Elden Ring or uh just anything else like that that we've discussed so far, but it's just interesting lore and really cool stuff to see.
Hell yeah. But going back to the like lore
Backstory.
being there just to explain shit, we should talk about a bad game. And
Yeah.
frankly, a game with some pretty bad lore, I'm gonna be real. I talked about it earlier. Uh Street Fighter 6 and just the Street Fighter series in general. It has pretty shit lore. I'm not gonna lie. And that's not to say that the like you can't get immersed with the story. That's not like what I'm saying whatsoever. I just think that it's kind of inconsistent with what it chooses to keep like real or not. So like, what's a good example? Um, M Bison dies in Street Fighter 5, but then comes back in Street Fighter 6 because why not? For context, Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5 take place before Street Fighter 3, and in Street Fighter 3, the idea is that it was kind of like a soft reboot for the series. Like most of the characters in that game are completely brand new, and that means that some characters like mainstays like Zangief, Blanca, Bison are not in the game, um, because they wanted it to be a soft reboot. But the justification for some of it was, M. Bison died in Street Fighter 5, and because he died in Street Fighter 5, he can't be in Street Fighter 3 because he's dead. But then he came back in Street Fighter 6. Why? I don't know, but he has amnesia now. Isn't that awesome?
Wowie.
Wowie
Yeah.
zowie.
Wasn't there also
Yeah.
I was gonna say, didn't Street Fighter 6 also like kind of soft retcon Blanca a bit? Because I remember when I was playing through the story mode of the game, you were like, "Wait, that's a retcon," because I explained something to you.
Yeah, no, they actually did retcon a little bit of Blanca. So, like, apparently, Blanca, prior to Street Fighter 6, wait, the reason why he has electric powers is because he, like, he, he fell into, like, a pool of, like, electric eels, and that turned his skin green. But in Street Fighter 6, they actually retconned that and said that he actually just paints his skin green. So, like, they're not consistent with what they choose to keep, like, canon and whatnot in the lore. And, like, the thing is that, like, the lore of, like, originally the lore of Blanca, I'm not even gonna say it's, like, good or bad lore, it's just an explanation as to why he's like that. But, like, the thing is that, like, it kind of tinges on bad, especially since, like, they kind of retcon it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like the whole electric eel stuff is a lot cooler than I painted myself green because I feel like it.
No, literally. And, like, it kind of, like, him, like, being green kind of, like, explains his animalistic nature. You know what I mean? But now he's just, nope, he just acts like that. Nope.
He
You know
just
what I mean?
gets a little annoying.
Oh,
But yeah,
I don't know. Fighting game lore in general is just kind of iffy, and it's something that you can't really, like, I don't know.
yeah, the only
It's hard to make it good, because you gotta, like, give
yeah,
justification for, like, why characters have weird powers and why characters can do some things and shit like that. Like, I don't know. There's no consistently good fighting game lore, which I'm okay with, but it's also just like, damn, they really retconning some shit out of here.
except for Tekken and Kazuya's shoe collection.
Oh my god, Tekken lore is so fucking funny. I'm not even gonna call it bad because it's, like, purposely absurd, but, like, the amount of times that Heihachi Mishima has died and come back is insane. And
He looked
came back, sorry, fuck. English major
Hey
here.
Heihachi looked at M. Bison and was like, "Hold my beer."
Literally. Bro died, I think, like, 3 times at this point.
Didn't
I'm
he
being so
literally
dead
get
ass.
down into a volcano and then still come back?
Yes, because he's goated.
Yeah, that's how you explain Tekken lore in a nutshell. Just he's built different.
He is built different. Literally, I'm not even kidding about this. He dies in, like, Tekken 5, maybe, but he gets, like... Oh, yes, I know what it is. The ending of, like, I think it's Tekken 4. Kazuya and Heihachi have to team up against, like, evil robots. They're like Jack 4s, and Kazuya, Heihachi gets pinned down by the bots, and Kazuya doesn't help him, so he escapes. But Heihachi, all the bots, like, they football tackle him, and then they explode, and then that's supposed to justify his death. And it's really funny, because what happened is that his body got blown up and, like, Team Rocket skyrocketed all the way to the distance, and he landed into a grave. And that's how he supposedly died. But then immediately in the next game, it fucking opens up with him climbing out of the dirt of the grave.
That's really funny.
It's so fucking funny. Oh god, Tekken lore is crazy. But, like, again, like, I'm not even gonna call the lore good because it's not. But it's just, like, fighting game lore in general is it's just there to explain something. It's there to explain context of something. And that's all it really needs to do. But sometimes you can be Tekken and just be fucking hilarious.
Yeah, I feel like that's what more fighting games should try to do. where it's just like so absurdly funny that you can't even really call it bad. But like there, like I think, I mean, I don't know a lot about Mortal Kombat lore, but I think it takes itself kind of seriously, which is kind of funny because like it really shouldn't.
It's also like just ass.
Yeah, but I actually think we're gonna do a double feature of bad lore because I don't want to end the video because I think we're gonna do one more round of good lore and I don't want to end the video on bad lore.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
All right, so I brought it up earlier in the video, but a game series that I think has bad lore is Horizon, and I feel like there are definitely going to be people who disagree with me, but like a lot of the lore in Horizon, and I'm going to quickly preface this. I'm also going to be talking about Forbidden West here, um,
Oh.
because Forbidden West kind of ruins a lot of the lore that the previous game built up. Because a big part of the lore of the first game is that the reason there are so many robots running around and stuff like that is because there was a civilization of people, of humans, that lived before and they were super advanced, but then they built robots that essentially gained sentience and then tried to wipe them all out. And it's a really cool setup that like nobody survived. No matter what they did, nobody could survive this onslaught of robots. So they built a they built a giant AI in order to preserve the world after they all died and to stop the evil robots. And it worked. And the whole thing is just like, even though all the humans and all of them had to die, at the end of the day, humanity still lives on because you play as the humans that are now, alive and well within the world that, like the and it's revealed later that it's at least implied that a lot of the people who are still alive are actually just clones of people who lived before. But you know, I I'm not a huge Horizon lore scholar. But then in the second game, it's actually revealed, oh, no, not everybody died. In fact, a bunch of rich people were able to fly away on a ship, and then the people on the ship, they actually figured out a way to become immortal gods, essentially, because they have armor that protects them from anything. They live for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and they can basically conjure up any weapon with the snap of their fingers with the technology they have, and they can also fly. Which is so stupid because not only does it ruin a very big part of the lore that happened in the first game with everyone died from this, nobody was able to get out scot-free, and then they ruined it by having the immortal alien gods show up, and then there's just a lot of like bad lore in the game because in the first game you can find these things that essentially give details on small little like like small little glimpses into the lives of these people, and there were some of them really interesting. But in the second game, a lot of it is just like, man, there's a puzzle around here, you gotta solve it, or man, our lives were so great until, and then it's the realization of like, oh, their lives aren't so great now. And it's just, there's just a lot of stuff like that, and it really really sucks, and it kind of destroys a lot of the lore that I actually kind of liked from the first game. And it's just really sad because just you didn't have to do that, you didn't have to destroy what was good about the first game. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that it's unfortunate, but I mean, sometimes when you're making a sequel, you can either expand the lore in a good way or do what Horizon does and not really do that.
yeah.
But
Um, but now we're gonna go into a double feature of good lore. And Guy, I'll let you go first since the game series I want to talk about is probably gonna be a little long.
I think I have an idea of which one you want to talk about, but I'm gonna go into another game that I y'all think I hate, but I don't. And it's Xenoblade 1. I fucking love Xenoblade 1. It's peak, and its lore is fantastic. What can I say? Um,
Who thinks you hate
Xenoblade 1.
Xenoblade 1?
So what?
Who thinks you hate Xenoblade 1?
Y'all just hate okay, you and Brewer specifically think that I hate like all of the Xenoblade series. And every
That's not
time
true.
y'all are like, you're a hater, you hate the Xenoblade series. I'm like, Xenoblade 1 is literally one of my favorite games of all time.
No,
Xenoblade 3 is
guy,
good. Xenoblade 3 is good. Xenoblade 2, however, is bad. Even though I think Xenoblade 2 has good lore.
we never say we think you hate the Xenoblade series. We say you're an elitist and only like Xenoblade 1,
Well, yeah, that's
which
true.
is true. You are a huge
That is just
elitist
true.
for
Yes, that
Xenoblade.
I won't even. I'm not even
That's
arguing that. I am agreeing with
I
you on
would
that. That is true.
I would never say you hate Xenoblade because you constantly say how good Xenoblade 1 is in comparison to the
Cause
other
it's
two.
great.
And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying no, you do not. I know you don't hate Xenoblade. I just know you're an elitist about it.
Cause it's awesome.
Yeah, but
But yeah,
go on ahead.
sorry,
Go on.
sorry. Xenoblade 1 is just goated. I hate to say it. I know people don't believe me, but I just had to let it be known that Xenoblade 1's pretty good. But getting away from that, um, Xenoblade 1, I think, does an excellent job of environmental storytelling, like we mentioned earlier with some of the other games like Zelda, where the entire setting of Xenoblade 1 takes place on two ginormous titans. They're so big that the entire world of like humans and the and like sentient races just live on these titans. And they do an excellent job of making sure that the world feels like you are on these giant titans, where you can, in the distance of like any location of the game, no matter where you're at, you can always see like a body part of these titans. And like, even like, here's a really cool part. You're on a metal sword. It's like the halfway point of the game, I want to say, where you're going across this giant sword, and the valleys that you travel across in this valley, in like the sword, are like are like, how do I put this? They're the etched out parts of the sword, because the sword is like designed to be like that. So it creates a valley where that you traverse through, where like a bunch of monsters and shit are. And I just think that's so fucking cool, because the lore of Xenoblade is kind of complicated in the grand scheme of things, like for the entire trilogy. But I just think Xenoblade 1 does an excellent job of like fleshing out the species and the races of characters through the environment. Like how fuck, what's a good example? Um the Homs are like the humans in the game. They're typically near the bottom of the Bionis, which is like the bionic, not the bionic, the biological titan. And they are there because they just appeared there. They grew from the Bionis there. Meanwhile, some of the more advanced races are towards the top, where like more of the magic reserves are, and that's how they became more advanced. It does an excellent job of like making consistent lore through its environment, and I don't know, it's just so fucking good. Like Connor, I know you can probably talk about this as well because you've played Xenoblade 1. I don't want to start repeating what I've said, but you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know a lot about Xenoblade lore. Um, I'm gonna be honest. I don't know a lot about Xenoblade lore actually,
Wait,
but
really?
I do. No, not really. Like, I really don't. Like, and it's not like I wasn't invested in the lore. It's just I played it so long ago and I never really looked it up, so I don't really know anything about it.
Oh, really? Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay. Fair enough. A good amount of the lore is told throughout the story of the game, but like some of the like deeper stuff, I can understand that.
I know. Okay, I know the story lore. It's just that story lore is kind of very spoiler heavy, if you know what I
It
mean.
is. Okay, the environmental stuff with like the Bionis and the Mechonis, I
Yeah,
don't think is
but
like
that's
that's not
that
spoiler
was
heavy, but like
yeah.
some of the context for like how the world was created, then yes, that is spoiler heavy.
Yeah, but no, I agree with like the again. I don't want to say Nintendo, but just Xenoblade and Zelda alone, like, know how to do really great environmental storytelling. I really like a lot of the environmental storytelling within Xenoblade, especially Xenoblade One. It's just really good, especially with like how the I guess the relationship between the Bionis and Mechonis work. I think that's just a really cool thing in there.
You know, I just think it's really cool. I don't know. Like we said before, Nintendo just does an excellent job of environmental storytelling, and Xenoblade One is just it's consistent with that, and that's the best I can really say about it. I don't want to get into too much detail because it is a game that I think everyone should play and experience for themselves, especially with such a cool fucking world. But I'm gonna let Connor have his piece with what his final example of what good lore is. Sorry, I am having trouble speaking today.
Yeah. So my final like game series that I think has great lore, and I'm gonna say it right now is my favorite video game lore, or just lore in general, is the Undertale and Deltarune series. And surprise, surprise, the person whose avatar is literally a giant reference to Spamton likes Deltarune lore. Um, yes, I don't even know where to begin. The Deltarune and Undertale lore is just so good, and how it communicates it is probably my favorite part. There is so much lore you can get within the history between specific characters that is either through just, and it's done through so many different ways, whether it be NPC dialogue. Great example is the is Spamton's lore. I really like Spamton's lore, and you get a lot of it not even through him, because of his quotes. For context, in Deltarune Chapter 2, Spamton is a sort of a side character, but the more if you explore the game and interact more with him, he actually becomes a very big character within the game. But a lot of his quotes, because he's supposed to be a sort of spam, he's supposed to be a spam email, like that's the whole thing behind him. A lot of his dialogue is like jumbled and has a lot of weird references and stuff like that within it. And so the amount of lore you can get from his sort of like, I would hazard to say like the words he censors through these little like glitches in his system, like it gets a, because it's like, what words are he have when he says 1987 or hyperlink blocked. What word is he censoring there? Like, what is he like being forced to censor there when he says that? And there's just so much in that within Undertale and within Deltarune. There's just so much there with that. I mean, I would say Undertale is like pretty up there with video game lore. It was sort of in the FNAF sort of Spain, where there's just so many theories and YouTube videos being made about the lore and how to interpret it and stuff like that. Like, would you agree with that?
No, I agree with that. It's just the problem is that for me at least, Elden Ring, sorry, I got Elden Ring on the mind. Undertale became a little too bloated with people who like were just saying it became the FNAF of like the modern day FNAF for a bit, where it was like people who were just spreading misinformation, and it was cringe misinformation too, that just kind of ruined like interaction with it for a while. But like when I would like get into like videos about the lore, I think it was like extremely well deserved in terms of like investment value and just what it was trying to do. Like the stuff with
Yeah,
like WD Gaster, a lot of the lore is very big on speculation. It's not confirmed. However, there's just a lot for you to invest in that makes the world feel like alive and just bigger than what it
yeah.
is, which is crazy because it's a
I,
6 hour fucking game.
yes, WD Gaster alone is enough of a phrase to make anyone who is a what I would say a Deltarune lore scholar, and I would say I am a Deltarune lore scholar, like shit your pants, because it, he is like he is implied to be such a big character, but we have virtually nothing on him. In fact, you could even argue we don't even know what his design looks like, because there are like three different like variations for what his design could be. And it's insane that a character that is supposed to be the master, that is implied to be like a huge mastermind behind it all, and we know virtually nothing about him because nothing's confirmed. But this sort of goes back to what I was saying before of like, I think this lore does a very good job of being ambiguous, and it's because it's not confusing. It's just we it gives this feeling that we just don't have all the puzzle pieces. But as the game, especially Deltarune, goes further, we get more and more of these pieces slowly building in, and we're starting to build more of like who is Gaster, who are these characters, what's the history here. And another reason I really like Deltarune lore is because a lot of it is done through its music. And if we ever do a music episode part 3, I swear to God I will finally talk about Deltarune and Undertale in that video, because the way Toby Fox uses leitmotifs in order to tell both, to not only to have great music but also to tell stories and give lore within those within the game is incredible. I'm going to go back to Spamton, but in Spamton's in his boss theme, which, yes, sorry to spoil, but he does become a boss later on, you can hear the freedom motif, which is a huge motif in the game, but you can also hear the previous uh, hidden boss, secret boss of the first chapter. You can hear Jevel's theme within his Spamton's theme, which immediately implies there's a connection there. And there are so many like thoughts and theories on what that connection actually is, and it's insanely cool, and I really love how that's done. And I like, again,
I
I
do
could
want to
go.
say this right now. This isn't technically lore, it's more so speculation.
Yes, there is a lot of speculation with Undertale and Deltarune lore, but personally for me, that's why I like it a lot, because there's so many interpretations you can have with it. But I just really like how Toby Fox handles lore, and how it's sort of like you were talking about earlier with what was it? It was about drip feeding. Oh, it was like Zelda. It's a slow sort of drip feed of lore, but there's so much of it that you can build the puzzle. It's just we don't have all the puzzle pieces right now, and I love that, and I think it's so cool, especially with how it is drip fed to us. But that is, I've been talking a lot about it, so I'm gonna cut this short because we are getting to that point where we need to wrap things up.
I think yeah. No, that's completely no. That's fair though. Like I think Undertale just has a very well thought out lore. Like even though there's not a lot of lore, I think it's just really well thought out because Undertale, like it had the thought that Toby Fox went into when making that game was, what if the monsters that you kill in RPGs are people as well? And I just think like he expands upon that concept so well and in such a beautiful way too. And I'm glad that like he put in effort to make sure that everything within the game's lore like was consistent and good. Even if a lot of it is still speculation, I just think it's still fun to like think about because the game is just fantastic. What can I say? And with Deltarune,
Yeah,
also the first two chapters have been fantastic. I'm excited to see where he brings the story and the lore of the series to. Obviously, like we are not going to know everything by the time chapter 3 and 4 releases, but I'm just excited again, I'm excited to see where everything goes from here. But with that
yeah.
being said, guys, I want to give our final thoughts. I'll let you go first, Conroy.
Yeah. So when it comes to lore, it is by far one of my favorite parts of it. I love looking up YouTube videos, going over lore of video games that I either have or haven't played, and just learning a lot about them because I think it's super cool and interesting when it's done well. And we've obviously brought up bad examples in this video, but it's just when lore is just such a great way to get people invested in your stories, I feel like, and to get them interested in the world you are building. And with video games, you really are just able to do a lot with that lore in different ways. Like I said earlier, with Toby Fox and leitmotifs, he's not even the only, like, leitmotifs is a great way to get lore across. Hollow Knight uses leitmotifs really well in with both storytelling and lore in the music. And it's just, I think there's just so many opportunities you have within video games to build up that lore and within that stuff like that too. And I just really like delving into video game lore, and I think it's a really cool aspect that video games have, because you're really able to tell lore differently than in like something like a movie where you have a limited amount of time to get that lore across. and with books you're able to tell a lot more lore, but you don't have that visual aspect of it. And I feel like lore within video games, just there's just a very unique way you can build it and give lore to the audience that you can't really in any other medium.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I think video game lore is fantastic. Like when it's done well, it does. When lore is done right, it's such a good way to immerse your audience in the world that you are trying to present. And when it's done poorly, I hate that it can very much like ruin the experience of a game for you. Like Horizon with with Connor, I know we keep bringing it up, but it is important to note. Um, but then you have great lore like the Souls games, with Elden Ring, Bloodborne, Dark Souls, where it's really well thought out lore in a sense that like everything that you do in the game is for a reason. There is no reason why stuff isn't the way it is, and it makes the game all the more better for it. That's why stuff is still talked about today. But I don't know. Even if your lore is bad, that doesn't mean it's going to take away the like fun factor of the game. Like especially with fighting games. Again, that's just lore for the sake of explaining stuff in the game. That's not really there to. It's not there to make you
Tell a
invested in the
story.
story. It's not there to like make you invested in everything that's going on. I mean, if you are, I mean, props to you, but like, that's not me at least. But with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching our episode today on video game lore. If you like this kind of content, please hit the like and subscribe button and comment down below what your favorite video game lore is, whether it be bad, good, mid, or just there to explain context for stuff. But with that being
Yeah.
said, guys, thank you so
Well,
much for watching today's episode. Connor, I know you got a thought. What's up?
I was gonna say, just in this video, if we, said like one of your favorite video game lores was bad, because I know a lot of people like the FNAF lore. That's again, that this is our opinion. We if you like the FNAF lore, well, more power to you. It's just me and Guy personally just don't like it.
Also, Cope.
All right, but yeah. With that being said, we have been FedQuest, and we will see you all next time.
Bye bye.
Goodbye.